Welcome back to the Weight of Coaching podcast, where we dig into the systems, strategies, and science behind building better athletes. I'm your host, Jordan Browne, head coach here at Method Barbell. Today's guest is someone who lives in both worlds, the classroom and the weight room. Josh Gibson is a PhD candidate, high school strength coach, weightlifting coach, and educator who's passionate about bridging the gap between research and real world coaching. We're going to talk about how to keep your coaching system evolving with what Josh has learned through coaching at a high school and through his studies, and how to make athletes better and use literature to make better training decisions. So, Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I don't quite know how I feel about someone reading a bio for me off as I listen to it. I think we all have our own perceptions of what we've done, where we've been, how we got there, and then hearing someone communicate that to you it's a different experience. I would recommend people try it. So maybe for everyone listening, text a friend, say, hey, come up with a quick, short little bio about me and tell it to me. And then I think it'd be a unique experience to hear what they say. So, Jordan, thank you for that. I appreciate the kind words. I also appreciate the invite onto the podcast, the weight of coaching. I think there are a lot of different ways you can kind of spin that, and I definitely respect you for pursuing it and starting it. And then providing a platform where coaches can congregate and talk through training and the means, methods, and processes they use to develop their coaching systems.
Sweet, thank you. Yeah, what actually just right off the top, like I sometimes I'll get my athletes that are kind of feeling down on themselves to reach out about what others, like people that they
Hmm.
care about, think about them. So I'll be like, I'll get my athletes to ask their friends or family, like, how would you describe me? And it's almost always like their internal dialogue about themselves is like a super negative, like vague, like something they would never say to anybody else. But then having somebody that they care about and have these emotions with tell them what they think of them and why they want to be their friend or why they want to spend their time, I mean, on this earth that we only have a limited amount of, with that person, tends to usually get them kind of out of that negative headspace.
Yeah, I call so in the business world, it's called 360-degree feedback or something like that. And I tend to ask for feedback. I had like this blow up with football. And none of the kids are going to listen to this, or nor the coaches. I had this blow up with football yesterday. I like the varsity and JV team in, and I was trying to get them kind of operating as a group. So hey, everybody's going to be ready. We're going to go on the go. Then we're going to rotate to the next guy. Then go rotate back at 2 rounds, and watching the group fall apart as a unit and get increasingly more chaotic and more there's this idea in physics about like entropy increasing across time. There was so much entropy in that weight room, so much chaos and disorder, and just like i I was boiling from the inside out. And so instead of like blowing up, I grabbed two kids and I said, hey, am I doing something wrong? Like, am I not communicating? What's going on? They're like, no, they've been like this all week. Like, it's just been a mess all week. And I was like, okay, well, there's my cue to say, like, get your shit together, basically. And that idea of approaching it from a feedback first standpoint, I've done that, with football coaches, it's the people involved who I think have a good stake and a helpful opinion. I'll reach out to them and say, like, hey, what do you think about what we're doing? What would you like to see more of? What do you like to see less of? And I think that is very, very important. And then from a personal standpoint, to get probably overly vulnerable on a podcast, which is sometimes necessary, sometimes unnecessary. I recently had someone I was like pursuing a relationship with stop pursuing it. And I reached out to a couple of friends and like talked through the process with them. And it was kind of like mourning and grieving the loss. And I just was received so well they communicated one, their loss as a person. It's like, wow, that's their loss. Like, you're an absolute cash. And I remember I was talking to a couple of friends, a couple of people I actually coached too. And I there's like a new person. I was kind of like, okay, maybe we'll go on a date or something. And they're like, wow, okay, when you guys get married, we'll go to your wedding. And I was like, you're like really, really optimistic. And they're like, well, she would only be so lucky to be able to do that. And I was like, oh my God, and that's the idea of kind of what you're talking about. It's like reaching out for support. And we all have our own, maybe getting a little too philosophical or psychological, but we all have our own lived experiences. And to be able to understand, like, our own lived experiences can be distorted, and that's cognitive distortions kind of encapsulates that. Other people can have similar opinions of you that are also distorted, but if they're distorted more in a positive sense or in a helpful sense of, like, maybe you aren't the nicest person in the world, maybe you aren't the absolute best person to be with, that perspective though can help shift away from a obviously distorted, negative, unhelpful one that we can tend to have with ourselves. So I love that. I think that's great. I think being able to communicate that to people, like, hey, this is a helpful strategy, is really important.
Yeah, finding your tribe, kind of like as a person, is really important, especially when we get to these areas that are a little darker in our lives that everybody naturally goes to. It's something that I see consistently. I posted about self complexity theory yesterday. I think it was yesterday, uh, and it's this thing that I've been toying with, where whenever my athletes start to have a tough time in one area, all of a sudden everything starts to go downhill. And when that starts to happen, I start pushing them out of the gym, where it's like, okay, we can't just put everything into weightlifting. Or I'll force athletes to be like, okay, we need more than just this thing. Like, I need you to find another hobby or find some friends or go spend more time with people that you like, uh, which can be difficult, especially when it's like you're a weightlifting coach or you're a coach and it's like you want them in the gym to progress, and sometimes taking that step back and being like, okay, you need to take some time uh, to recenter yourself has been one of the most like impactful things that I've found for those people that are struggling. And then if they don't have that, it's finding a way for them to kind of get out of their shell, because as soon as we start feeling that stress, we kind of isolate into the parts that are either going well or that have tended to get us there. And so if when we isolate ourselves or bring ourselves small, it's like, if we don't have those things already, we're not going to go find them. So it's like that double-edged sword of like, okay, we need to find these people, but if we don't have them, it's like, where are we going to find them?
Yeah. Well,
And then it's,
yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all great. And it reminds me of a very important aspect of this all, which athletics can kind of drown out and suffocate. And Mike Young, so recently held the Power and Strength Summit, which is an online conference, like speaking event for strength and power athletes, really, and people involved in S&C and weightlifting and powerlifting. And Mike Young, absolute wizard, genius, the man, the myth, the legend, whatever moniker you want to give him, he presented on plyometric progressions. He was also on the round table toward the end, and there was the last question I asked was, what is the one thing you want to achieve as a coach before you're done, before you hang it all up? And there was like, produce many Olympians, do this, do that. And then, Mike kind of, he extinguished the flame in the right way. He said, this is all kind of silly stuff we're doing. Athletics all kind of silly. It's all kind of stupid. And he didn't mean that in like a very derogatory, like you're an idiot for pursuing that. But it's like, oh, you're trying to put a ball through a hoop. You're trying to lift weights over your head. There are things that are much more important than that. So I try, and I think this is useful when you coach people for very, very long stretches of time. It's like, hey, I understand that performance might be going well. And for example, I coach a powerlifter. Her name's Julie. And I've coached her for like the last almost decade. And she's gone through competing in powerlifting, having a kid, competing in weightlifting, switching back to powerlifting, hitting like all-time PRs on a competition platform. And then she's going into law school. And she's going to be in law school for 4 years as she works full time, helps take care of her family, and then also makes time for training. And she's like, hey, this is going to be really hard to find motivation during this period. And I said, not really, not for you, because you recognize that like this is your form of self-care and this is the most important thing for your own health and well-being. And it's that reframing of, I get that weightlifting is very important. Health and function and wellness are more important than that. And that's like full stop. And you could say, well, like, but I want to do this and do that and I make money off it. It's like, that's all great. That's all like awesome and cool. Your health and well-being is like the most important thing. And that reframing of, and I try to communicate this at a high school level, but it's hard to get past that. Like, sport is the only access to physical activity. I'm really glad you guys are stoked to get better at your sport, but like ingrain these habits now. So when you're out of high school and you don't have the same social support, financial support, parental support, you can take care of yourself physically, and you're going to have these like habits locked in. You're going to know how to operate in a weight room. You're going to understand at some preliminary level programming, because you've been doing it. You have the system kind of like embedded in your, in your nervous system. And the most important thing is you keep training for the rest of your life, because like that's your investment in your health span and your, quote unquote health 401k. So I love that you kind of bring them back to, you're more complex than just a performance. There are also things that are more important than just the performance. And a lot of that is how this supports things you do outside of the weight room. And that feels like it's like, oh, it's kind of like a thing you'll say on the side. It's like, no, that's actually the most important thing to me,
Yeah,
personally.
I agree. I was just on another podcast, which you'll hear a week before this one comes out. But but he was talking about how when he stopped competing, he was like struggling with work and everything like this, and he was putting all of this pressure and starting to hate either side. Where it's like, I hate work for taking me away from my training, making it worse, and I hate training, or I hate work because it's taking me away from my training. So it's like you're hating both sides of like that complexity or of that self because they're taking you away. And so that's kind of when he realized that he needed to take a step back from competing. So it would be like, as he would get busy, as he would get into like this competition prep and you start getting that pressure, it's like you stop realizing what you're doing it for, where it becomes like, I am a competitor, I am a weight, or whatever that looks like. You start putting those I am statements in, instead of being like, I am all of these things. I do this to have fun, to do my physical literacy or my physical activity that you need in the week. And taking that pressure away of like, okay, I don't need to compete because I can compete in all of these other aspects, but I want to train and I want to enjoy training, takes that pressure away, or that identity away that's super negative when we have those hard times. And he found that really helpful in like not telling everybody to quit competing or anything, but like understanding that there's like these seasons of life that we kind of ebb and flow through, and we can come back and go back into, of like, okay, life's going to be really stressful. Taking that pressure off of like competing or doing all of these things, or being like, I train 5 days a week because that's what I always did and that's who I am. And being like, okay, like let's navigate this, or even like incorporating other aspects that might reduce some of that stress or that burden on you. So something I've been playing with is some of my athletes, I'll like reduce their training load or training volume, and I'll tell them to go do other things. So some are like going rock climbing or spin, or like building this community outside of just training, where it's like, if these things are going a little less good, they can go find that elsewhere. They can diversify these aspects and take that pressure off of that one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another important point, and I think one of you're kind of hinting at, is like, you realistically don't have to do anything. Like, even when we talk about it from a health standpoint, one thing I've learned, and this is through my own, like, just trying to psychologically understand like where I'm coming from and where other people are coming from. You don't have to lift weights. You also don't have to care about your health. You don't have to do any of it. The decision to do it is like, it's kind of this recognition of like, this is, and I've done good podcasts with like Jordan from Barbell Medicine and Austin Brocky, and I think they frame it really, really well. And I love everything Barbell Medicine does. So I guess I'm a fanboy. I can't find any holes in it. And a lot of that is because it's very there's a lot of autonomy they inject into the situation. If you want to treat a medical condition, that's a decision you ultimately need to make. No one should make that for you. If you want to pursue physical activity, that's something you should decide to do. And it's not like you must do this much physical activity in this way to be healthy. It's more so like if you decide to pursue that based on, what you understand or how you think about your own health or your own interaction with the world, then that's something we can support you with. And it's putting out high quality information to correctly communicate it of like, these are the risks of not training. You should understand them. And then deciding to not train, it's like you just accept the risk. And that's totally okay. So there's no like there is no must, there is no have to, there is no, you're the moralistic, you're bad if you don't, or you're good if you do. It's like, no, you just made a decision to, support yourself in this way, and you accept whatever risks or potential harms from, say, even resistance training. It's like you might accept that you might tweak something or something might happen and you might have to change training or modify it or pursue something else. But from my standpoint, I'm a big advocate of physical activity and pursuing kind of this like longer health span, which is a word I picked up when I was talking to Jordan. But it's this idea of like how functional, quote unquote, functional are you going to be throughout your lifespan? That is your health span. So like you have a lifespan, which is birth to death. And then you have your health span, which is like, how do you operate in the physical world throughout that? And I'm all about just like maximizing it, taking advantage of it and doing as close to what is evidence-based as possible.
I've been seeing you running a lot more. It's been nice to see.
Yeah.
I
started a program for a half marathon. Because so to your point, I think this actually is a good case study of what Jordan was talking about at the start of the podcast. I know that I value physical activity and health, but I didn't do any cardio. I didn't do any conditioning. It's like, okay, now I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I tell people like, hey, I think it's best if you engage in, some form of like cardio, throughout the week to maximize health outcomes. And it's like, but I don't do it. And then I'd get gassed walking up flights of stairs. And I thought to myself, like, okay, what's stopping me? One, I feel like I need an outline or a program, or I have to do it a certain way. That's all a story. That's just like a bullshit story I'm telling myself. So what I did is I just started running. I didn't have a program. And for months, I generally would run a 5K. I don't know why, but I like gravitated towards that. So I just run for 30 minutes, run a 5K, whatever pace felt hard. And I did that long enough to where I kind of built some capacity in my body, also some just general like discipline. And then recently I've like, okay, I want to start taking this a little more seriously and pump my volume up, because my understanding is the physical activity guidelines recommend 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. That's a fucking load. That's a load. So I'm like, okay, I'll start training for a half. That's going to give me all the kind of road time I need to almost top off that like cardio side. And I've been doing that, and I noticed that my training sessions now in the weight room, I feel like I have a longer engine. Like I don't feel like I gas as hard. I don't feel like I just like hit a wall as quickly, and I feel like a little fresher throughout. And that's completely correlational. I don't even know. Maybe I just feel good because training's kind of like improved itself. But I think there's some benefit to that like underlying base of fitness I've been building the last like handful of months. So I've been doing that, and that's been a lot of fun. It's actually been fun. It's been hard in a different way.
Sweet. Yeah, something I've done for quite a while is a like ebb and flow from like giving structured conditioning work to my athletes, and it'll ebb and flow because we get to competition. It's like, oh, we're near competition. We got to prioritize recovery, and I take it out even though it's like the minimum effective dose. It's not like it's really impacting that much of their fitness. And then the next block, I'll like almost forget because it's not in my system, like in my programming system of like this has to be here, and it'll stay out for like 3 months for the next block, and then it'll be like, well, they're getting gassed going up the stairs or in these complexes or whatever that looks like. And I'm like, shit, put it back in. And it'll go through like these waves every so often. And it's like, maybe something I need to do is like consistently keep it in for longer periods of time and just be like, okay, this has to stay here. I need to organize this better. Maybe it's structured, maybe it's unstructured. Something of like play where it's like disorganized play or
Totally.
unstructured
Yeah.
play where it's like something that I'm looking at is we have a pickleball area, so it's like getting them to be like, okay, let's just go play pickleball, or like let's learn how to play pickleball, or let's learn how to do this other thing, or creating these pods of like, let's go for a bike ride or a walk or something where it just increases that. And I haven't figured out what the best route is of like trying to structure it so it actually gets done versus and like trying to get it to become a habit and then hoping that it becomes less structured, or what that kind of looks like. But
Yeah. I think there's also, we talk about personal preference. I think there are the non-negotiables. You know, it's like, okay, if I'm doing cardio or if I'm engaging in resistance training, there is a certain like minimum viable product. You know, like you have to lift at some sort of intensity. You have to kind of lift through some ranges of motion. And it's not like you have to squat, but it's doing yoga is not resistance training, really, like realistically. And for endurance, like cardio or conditioning, gaming, like virtual, like video gaming, it's like that might be a sport, but like just playing a sport isn't going to take you there. So it's also, I think, reining that into the point of we still have to kind of push, and it's going to kind of be work. And I think that idea of like leaving it open ended, treating it more like play in the sense of like do something fun, like get out, compete, just have a good time with their friends, get other people involved, build a community around it. Like that's fantastic. I usually just go pound the pavement. I just get out, put some great music in, and hit like I did a 4.5 miler over the weekend, and that was actually pretty fun. I was like in a good groove, and then I did 2.5 miles yesterday, and it was miserable. It was so terrible. But that's because, you wanted to talk about my work at the high school. That's because I'll have groups, call it from 9 to 12, and then I might have an hour. And then I'll have another group, and then I'll have 2 hours. And it's like, okay, where do I fit training in? So I had like a high volume squat session yesterday. It was like tons of squatting, tons of volume. And then I went to do a 3.5 mile easy run, which was the opposite of easy. I think I was like one, you know, 0.001 miles per hour above walking speed, or 1 kilometer, 0.001 kilometer, above walking speed. So it was a really tough one, but fitting it into that schedule of, teams, break, team, it's kind of what you have to do.
how do you communicate or teach these life lessons or these things to the high school kids or these youth athletes that you're kind of working with?
Yeah, that's funny. That's a great question, by the way. And that's something I've thought a lot about because I don't have a background in athletics, like formalized athletics. People ask me like, oh, I compete in weightlifting and I'm not like terrible at it, like, what'd you do? Like, what's your background? It's like, I skateboarded for 20 years. And like, I went and skateboarded the other day and I actually have some clips I was thinking about putting up, but I'm getting new tricks. Like I was like board sliding on boxes and I'm kind of, dropping in on these little ramps. And, and so I don't have any formalized experience being in that setting where you have a group, you have an obvious leader, and then you have that power dynamic where it's very motivational, it's very supportive, it's also very like hey, this is something we have to do. We have a standard, and seeing that play out, and then trying to kind of figure it out, like doing this like forensic analysis of it, of like, okay, how would good coaches approach this? I look at other models. So I would look at, say, the football coach and see how he approaches it. I'd look at the wrestling coach. I've like been in collegiate weight rooms shadowing and observing, and I like, how do they approach it? So it's something where I'm like, one of Max Ada's favorite kind of like colorful examples of like building the plane while I'm flying it. So it's been this going into my third year, like kind of shortly after the start of my third year. And I found my approach is very just like very authentic, and it's trying to communicate it honestly. So volleyball has been a group that's been really hit and miss. And this year they've been really good about coming in consistently. And I think I kind of had this moment where I stopped them after a lift and I was like, hey, you guys are killing it. Like, these are things that you're doing that is very supportive of your health long term. It's very supportive, like these other aspects of like you beyond just performance. Like, you should be proud of that you're committing to that and you're doing things that are directly helping you directly get there. So it's been that like somewhat breaking down the fourth wall, somewhat pulling back the veil and just saying like, hey, these are things that are going to change your life. And I really want you to know that, because it's dead serious. There's like no fabricating it. I don't have stock in big physical activity. Like, I don't make money off of it. So me telling you that is like, this is true. I believe this to be true. And I think it's very important you understand that. So I have a couple kids who are going to compete in a weightlifting meet actually in a few weeks. Who they're girls who started as freshmen. They've just been in the weight room consistently and grown to love it, and they're like super bought in. And one girl's a wrestler, and she comes in really consistently. She actually said something along the lines of she couldn't come in one day. She was sick, and she's like, I cried because I couldn't come into squat. It's like that interested and bought into the weight room. And I told her one day, so I have all the kids set up in the front of the room by the dumbbell racks, and then I'll kind of go over the workout briefly, give them a primer of like what we're doing, what we're expecting, what the structure is in the flow. And then I might say a few words. And I told her, like, why do you think I pick kids to do the warm up? Because we have a stock warm up. I don't do it myself. I don't lead it. I'll get kids to do it, and I'll let them kind of decide who wants to. And sometimes I'll call on kids. And she's like, maybe she said something along the lines of like, oh, I don't know. It's like, I let kids do that because it helps them develop the skill of speaking in front of a big group. And I think they get caught in this idea of, I'm not a leader, that person's the leader. Like the quarterback's the leader. The best scorer on the team's the leader. That's just like a bullshit narrative. And so it's a story you're telling yourself. It's not true. Like, anybody can be a leader. Yeah, there are probably dispositions that tend toward being more open and extroverted and, taking up space in the room. But anybody can be the one who steps up in front of a group and says, hey, we're going to go on my count. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're doing these movements. This is the quality. Anybody can do that. So it's very important to me to be deliberate about picking them out and giving them exposure to that so that after high school, they're prepared for it. I know when I started public speaking in college, more speaking in front of groups, presenting, I just would like piss myself every time. So it's like, how do we grade that exposure? How do we inoculate them against that fear? And a lot of that is like giving them the opportunity to do that. Also communicating why that's important. So I take that approach of like, here's what we're doing, really. Here's why it's important, beyond just the sets and reps or beyond your performance on the mat or the court or the field. And that's because these are lifelong lessons. Like, these are lifelong attributes or qualities or investments in your health, your health 401k that you're going to be very grateful for later, but you might not recognize or understand now. So I tend to take that very just like honest, obvious approach to leadership, because I have no affiliation with the kids otherwise. Many of those coaches, some of those coaches are teachers, so they have like a different connection with them. I'm not. I'm a strength coach. So what you get is the most like honest take of the situation possible. And that's so, there's just no confusion. So I try to lead by direct example and be very forward about how that it's going to work itself out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you see as like things that are missing in development for like these youth athletes? So like the character skills, whatever we want to look at.
Yeah, I would say the things I find very important that I love saying like take would be the ability to accept and use feedback and not get like bothered by it or offended by it or take it as like a personal assault. It's like, hey, when you're doing this, if you adjust it in this way, you're going to be in a stronger position. It's like, you're right. Thank you for the feedback. And like seeing that play out and seeing how respectful the kids are when they receive feedback and how appreciative they are, that's like, I think that's a pretty good sign. That's definitely something I look for. Just a kind of like general interest in the weight room is something I try to facilitate. So it's not like, so when I talk to kids, like, oh, how you feeling? What do you think about training? They're not like, I'm here, this is like, culturally popular, or it was that Marshawn Lynch quote, I'm here so I don't get fined. It's like, so I don't get that response from the kids. Like, I'm just here because the coach wants me to be here. But it's like, oh, I'm here because the coach wants me to be here. I'm also here because it's fun. And I've gotten that feedback from kids of like, yeah, I don't hate it. And when my friends are here, it's really fun. So it's like, how do we keep that interesting and then allow them to develop this like familiarity with it where they're not going to lose it. When you've been in the weight room long enough, like you don't lose that like competence, understanding, and you're going to be more likely, I think, later in life to then pursue it again if you ever take a break from it. So I'd say from a developmental standpoint, it's a lot of it's like, how do you take coaching? How do you receive it? How do you communicate, then to someone who's coaching you? How do you receive the weight room? So it's like, how do you receive all of these things you're being told or asked or demanded to do? And then how do you on the back respond to it? So those are big things. I think there's like overarching things I kind of look for.
There's this company that's getting more popular. It's called Kid Strong, and have you heard of it? So essentially, what it is a physical literacy like youth activity center where it's like they go through three different sections. So there's like character development, physical development, and emotional development. So they format it in this way where it's like they put the kids in leadership positions where they have to present, or they work on like courage of like doing the hard things, where it's like most people are scared of heights, but at a younger age we're a little less scared because we don't know that we're going to get hurt or what the causes or the effects are going to be. So it's like they have this framework that they push the kids through of like developing those three characteristics, or those three like buckets of characteristics. And it's something I think about a lot of how does youth sport kind of facilitate that, because if they can do it in like this S&C like strength aspect, how do coaches create a framework, or strength coaches or whatever that looks like, create that framework to move that needle forward, especially as youth sport participation keeps dropping year after year, as kids are specializing sooner and getting put into like these higher pressure situations, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one thing I would say on that, there's two things. One is what great thing sport has done for getting kids in the weight room. Like I love when I have a group of I have girls soccer coming, and the coaches make the lift mandatory now for attendance. Um, Two stories I'll say. One is because it's mandatory. I had 31 girls soccer players in on Thursday. No, Wednesday or Thursday. I know Wednesday or Thursday. I had 31 girls in the weight room, and you look around and they do basic S&C, right? It's okay. We're gonna do one day because they're in season. They're coming up on in season now, so we're not squatting twice a week. So we're gonna squat one day. We're gonna clean one day. Do some overhead, weightlifting derivatives. One day, do some clean derivatives. One day, we're gonna do some like basic unilateral work. Probably do a little bit of jumping. Just like I take a step back and there's that crack in the persona where it's kind of cool that sport got 31 young girls in the weight room and they're like training hard, and making like having fun with it. And then you take a step into that even more. Some of those kids really wouldn't have had the opportunity to experience it for what it is. So I have a girl who's going to do that weightlifting competition in September, and I've been coaching her for like 2 years, and she's accepted more and more of a leadership role in the weight room to the point where she'll take my sheets because I have formatted sheets that all the kids use. She'll take it, she'll get the girls to like group around, and she'll say, okay, I'm going to go over the prep circuit and the workout. And then she'll go over it top to bottom, just like I do, and like demo exercises and get them up to speed and lead the entire team. in the weight room, and she's like a 16-year-old soccer player. And when she started, she was just like a freshman who wanted to play soccer, and she kind of developed into someone who's like, I'm going to, decide to lead the group and get them bought in and help support them. And that wouldn't have been, I mean, that could have been possible without sport, but like, that's really cool. Sport allowed her to be able to experience that. And now she's going to do her first weightlifting meet in, a handful of weeks. And that's going to be really special for them to then take that full circle of first day in the weight room, then experience the weight room as sport. And I think that's going to impact them for the rest of their lives. I think that's the most important thing. So that's like great. I love that. And then the other side of that kind of answer or response to what you mentioned is how hard it is to be aware enough and in the mindset or mind state of it's important to instill these socio-emotional skills and movement competency. And it's like, that's staggering. And it's really hard from my experience in an S&C setting, which is also embedded in a sports setting or a performance setting, because having 40 teenage boys in a weight room and then saying like, yeah, let's understand how we can regulate ourselves so we're not just shutting down is really hard. And then you're also having to navigate that. But I need to be respected as someone who's the authority, and just letting people act however they want, or it's much more complicated. That web is much more interweaved than it is like, oh, this is a good thing to do, therefore you should do it. I believe seeing that modeled effectively would be very important. Seeing it played out in real time, different contexts. So I love that idea. It's harder. It's hard. It's really hard. And I think the one thing I've had to accept, which is, circle all the way back to the front of the podcast, it really isn't about doing it all perfectly and getting everyone there. But it's like, can you win at some points? And like, can those wins be meaningful? And accepting that like gradient of, I did a good job here, I didn't here. And that's just how it kind of pans out, because no one can be perfect all the time. So sometimes I'll let things go as like, that's just not going to be my win for the day. I'll accept it. Here's where I can get a win. And that's really important. I get one there. So that idea of like being able to operate in that kind of messy space of not being perfect is really important too. And I think that fits in with whenever we have theories and models, you have to accept that messiness of it, and not hold yourself to such a rigid standard that you are going to fail repeatedly.
Sweet. Yeah. I've been reading a lot into like creating like a value structure, culture, like reading Phil Jackson, whatever book you want, John Wooden, Pete Carroll, all that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting kind of conceptualizing how you're trying to create like a value structure for these athletes to mold onto, to create these better humans, and how like these little phrases that you start to use that you have to educate the athlete on and chip away at create like these meaningful effects. Kind of looping it back to like my start, like I was very unathletic, I wasn't very fit. I found weightlifting through CrossFit and through soccer, where it's like soccer got me into the gym got me into CrossFit got me into weightlifting. And then from that, I developed this like self-competency, this self-efficacy, everything like that, where it's like, I can take these leadership roles, I can use this, and I can develop these skills, and it's a safe space, and I can build from here that I would have never expected prior to that. Where it's like, you look from where you start or where you're in that weightlifting gym, where it's like that girl going to the weightlifting competition probably didn't expect 2 years down the line to be like, I'm going to go compete in a snatch and a clean and jerk. I'm just going to do soccer. Or like for myself, it's like you start at this area where it's like, I'm going to do the soccer academy, and then everybody's going to doubt me. I'm going to prove them wrong. And then somehow I get to owning a weightlifting club and having a podcast about how coaches can better coach, where it's like this crazy, like you zoom out on your life and like all the decisions and little impacts that everything have from coaching. And I struggle to not be like, oh, how am I doing this wrong? Where it's like just being like, it doesn't have to be perfect, just
Mm.
chip away. And I liked what you said, where it was like, just try and get the little wins. Just try and get a little win every session, every week, or something like that. Where it's like, try and build that momentum, just like we try and do for training. Where it's like, just try and build that momentum of like, okay, chip away at instilling these things.
I think to that point, a good example comes to mind when you go for a call like a jerk PR, right? You're not going to bump 15 kilos like plus, you're going to bump like 1 to 3. If like 1 to 3 would be fucking fantastic. And I think when we start, it's probably this like unrealistic estimation of I want to bump, because that's what the kids think. Oh, I should be able to squat 315 because I want to. It's like, no, physiology doesn't work that way, pal. And like, I'm super stoked for you. And I literally had a kid today in baseball. He was like, he's like, do you think I can do this? And I told him, and I don't think he picked up on it. I told him, I'm gonna be the most honest person you're probably gonna experience when I talk to you about this stuff, because I'm gonna tell you exactly what you can do, and I'm not gonna bullshit you. If you think you can do it, give it a shot. And I try to communicate the idea of like, I'm not gonna bullshit you of, oh, big dog, you got it, just try hard. Oh, you'll get it next time. It's not how physiology works. We don't work that way. It's not a will thing. To some extent, if you match effort, it's like you're capable of what you're capable of. And I'm going to tell you that exact number. And if you don't like that because it's pessimistic, it's like, that's just being real. And that's trying to get you to then like understand where you're at. And we're going to celebrate it when you exceed that. But we're also going to recognize like we all have our limits. And I think when kids start out, it's very just like they're going to overestimate their abilities and fail a lot. So it's like, how do you rein yourself in to be, real and optimistic or hopeful, but also real? And I think that idea of you aren't perfect, therefore not everything should be, as like this imaginary script of perfection, which is I walk into the weight room, everyone loves me, everyone makes PRs, everyone leaves happy. It's like, that's not going to happen. And that's not real. And like the expectation it should be real it's going to lead to frustration. And the expectation that everything's perfect or to a standard is going to lead to like existential frustration. Like, why isn't my life working out this way? It's like, working out what way? One you're just kind of imagining or making up. It's like, no, you're not gonna plus 15. So why do you expect that like these rapid, huge changes will happen? So I've had to ground myself a lot and really just be appreciative of the people I can impact, because I just can't impact everyone. Can't make everyone happy. It's like, oh, this relationship's never going to be a happy one. That's okay. And it's going to frustrate me. It's going to frustrate them. And I'll do the best I can, but like, that's just the nature of things. There's no reason to get too bogged down by it, and I think that is the most helpful perspective, because if you can +1 or +3, you're doing a great job.
How do you navigate having those conversations? I find with like the youth athletes that I work with, is they'll either be one of the two realms of like hyper optimistic and then they swing to pessimistic. How do you navigate trying to teach them that like middle ground?
I think it would be an investment in the process. So with baseball today, after the blow up with football, baseball today, I started off with, hey, I don't want you to look back in 2 years and be frustrated that these technical things you didn't pay attention to are now your limiters. These are the bottlenecks. So like in a high school weight room, I'm rubbing my face because it frustrates me thinking about it. People squatting above parallel is like it should be a sin. I mean, it should be a crime against humanity. And I told them, like, in 2 years, I don't want to be yelling at you to squat low. That's like, holy crap. Are we serious? Like, are we really, really serious? That is the equivalent to me of going for a run and putting your shoes on backwards. It's like that. That's just the buy-in. The buy-in is just squatting to death. The rest is like, brace well, be ready, get your mindset right, get up, right, get super excited, and then just smash a big lift. But like, if you're thinking about depth 2 years later, like, where I did something wrong. So I had this conversation of like, here's the expectation with quality. We're not going to bend on that. And that's something we're going to look back on and be really appreciative of when we want to push weights later on. So I think from the standpoint of getting them to buy into that process of we need to be really bought into our technique, our movement quality, and pushing that as hard as we can, because that is something that's agnostic to your physiology. Call it like your force production. Some people are going to walk into the weight room. I've had a kid, like freshman football player, squat 200 kilos. And then I've had kids who can barely squat 45 kilos. And it's like, okay, what's the difference? Like it's literally their force producing machinery, but the technique can be the same from both. I don't think there's a problem with getting them both to perform the same quality of a squat. So invest in the process, focus on movement quality. And then the way I like to prove to kids that I know what I'm talking about, because they don't know who I am. Nobody knows who I am. They're like, oh, you're in school? It's like, you didn't know that? It's like, well, why would you know that? Why would you care? You probably don't even know what that means. It's doing things that they then understand to be true. So it's like someone will take a weight and I'll say, hey, you have 20 pounds. You're going to do 3 reps. The fourth's going to be grindy. You're going to miss it. Then they'll do that and they'll be like, you're right. It's like, yeah, I've been around this block. And they're like, okay, I'm going to trust what you tell me then and your expectations for me. So I think that idea of instilling this like confidence in my coaching, but also this like interest in movement quality and like not only movement quality, but kind of like culture in the weight room, is those are very important things. Cause then they're like, they walk into this other world when they're in the weight room of like, all the dumbbells are put back perfectly. All the benches are put back in the right way. All the bars are at a certain height. And it's like, okay, we're kind of entering into this like process of we go into the weight room, we use it, we do the best job we can, we leave it the same way it was when we came in. And I found making it more than just lifting weights also to be important, because then kids communicate that too of like, hey, don't leave your shit out. Like clean that up. And it's like that, then it becomes so much more. And I think that culture has gone a long way in making it feel more like a program than just like, got to get a lift in, got to do this because coach wants me to, but like something I think kids take pride in. And then also the sport coaches being bought in. So our baseball coach is fantastic. He after a lift one day, we had all the guys in front of us and he's like, hey, take pride in the weight room. Like if you have free time, like clean stuff up, put stuff away, like use that time well. And he treats it just like he does baseball. Like you're not going to leave baseballs out. Take pride in the equipment, put the equipment back when you're done. And I think that helps create more than just like that single performance focus of you like made your squat or you missed it. It's like, shoot, I missed it. And it's like, yeah, we weren't ready for it, but we'll be ready at some point. And then let's get right back involved in that process of, okay, now we got to move on to the next exercise, set my rack up, put the bench back, get rolling to the dumbbell rack, stuff like that.
What's been one of the biggest barriers, constraints, or like difficulties transitioning from being a weightlifting coach into being a high school strength conditioning coach?
Yeah, I love that question, because as someone who's had to deal with like, I would say like an abnormal amount of difficulty transitioning, it is because I was so specialized. So if we take that whole physical literacy idea, I was so specialized. Like I just coached adults in weightlifting and powerlifting and been in clubs and been at this, everything's a snail's pace. And I'll train with, people and it's like, oh, your workout takes 3 hours. It's so funny. And, and it's like, it's a very mature environment. It's actually, I think I lacked a lot of professionalism I would have now approaching it, or maybe more seriousness, or maybe just like operating a little bit to a higher standard myself. And coming into the high school setting, it's, I remember the moment I got christened as the new strength coach. I was standing there with the older guy, and we had like 3 kids doing some cleans, and I was standing and watching, and one of the kids had a question, and the old strength coach was like, oh, well, Coach Gibson's the new coach, you ask him. And I was like, all right, this is it. And then that next day it's like 30 kids come in, 20 kids come in, 10 kids, and it's like groups every day. And it doesn't end. I've been doing it for 3 years. And that, to then not have there's no one else in the weight room. There are no coaches. It's just me and the kids. And it's like, okay, I've never one shadowed a high school strength coach, let alone been in a high school S&C program. It's like, I've got to figure this out. And the things that stuck out with me that I tried first, which was like, be very strict and then let up, have these certain things in place. And I just like, it was really hard for me to figure it out, to navigate that space of like how to be personable with the kids, but not like overly personable, how to coach well and not just like how to not coach to a stereotype of like, oh, we're going to be no nonsense and no bullshit. And there's like no music. And part of that was needed because the kids didn't have structure. Like the guy who was there previously just didn't create a structure or a framework or flow that allowed me to like, oh, they understand it, they respect it, they appreciate it, and they do it well. The next person who's going to come after me, I've worked with groups so much that, they'll come in, they get ready for the warm up. If we're going to do clean work, maybe they all set up the rack, grab a bar, and then they just wait for the command. And being able to build that expectation of like, okay, it's something we take seriously. It's something with a process. It's something we don't just like treat like a cafeteria. The weight room's not a cafeteria. We just joke around and talk shit, and then we'll walk over and happen to do a lift or take a bite of a sandwich if we're still using that cafeteria example. It's like, no, we're here to work. We're here to work, and we can have fun because we're working really well, and that's like super fun and really exciting. Big lifts are really fun. Screaming is really fun, but doing that because we're just like smashing our workout is different than just like kind of being a Neanderthal, so to speak. So the really, really difficult part was figuring out how to manage 40 kids in different sports of different genders, of different experiences and skill levels and expectations, and then scaling that on the fly from top to bottom, from group to group, day to day, week to week, month to month, season to season, and then coach to coach. That it's a lot. And I feel way more comfortable now, 2 years in, but like, and I use this example. Chris Tabor said this with teaching. He's like, oh, just give it like a year or two, you'll find a groove. And it's like, I think people understand that when we say something like that, like just give it a year. A year's a long fucking time to like just wait and you'll figure it out. So it took me a long time, but I feel like I've finally found that groove. So I think people who are in similar roles, I don't know who would be. I don't feel like there are a ton of high school strength. Maybe I'm wrong. There probably aren't a ton of high school strength coaches, but give it time, be open to learning, find mentors, right? A lot of experience, and then just also be open to being just like a good human who also coaches and figuring out how then to be that in the process, which is also hard, also really hard.
One of the things that I noticed, like difference between the gymnastics club that I work with, where a lot of high standards, a lot of effort goes into like what that culture looks like. And then I work with some hockey academies, some soccer academies, is like the cultural differences and what standards look like between the two are so vastly different that it's like the gymnastics club sets up, tears everything down, like puts all the equipment away, puts it all nicely. Now, some of the kids don't necessarily enjoy weight training, and that's kind of what you expect. But then when we go to like these hockey kids, it's like the effort, the attention, the like cleanliness, all of these kind of standards that you would expect just aren't there. And it's this situation where I find myself like I don't work with the academies nearly as much as I work with the gymnastics club, which I work with every week. I work with them maybe like 3 times a semester, the academies 3 times in a semester, where it's you get into this situation of like, I don't have enough time to build these standards or like apply these standards. So you have to kind of build the ship while you're flying of like, okay, how do I try and instill something, some semblance of like respect, control?
Well, and my hope kind of to that point is that it's that idea of anyone could be a good person when there's like law enforcement around, like people watching, but it's like, do you decide to do the thing when no one's watching? And I think my hope for those kids, and this is what I talk about with like lifelong physical activity, is I create a process and a standard that you can replicate when I'm not coaching. That's the most important thing. It's not because I think it's, well, we have to do it one way because my way. It's like, I think this is objectively the best way to do it. It's objectively the best way, to do it in terms of having a clean weight room, an organized weight room, having respect for the equipment, having respect for people lifting, having respect for yourself. Having respect for yourself means making good lifts with good technique. If you don't have respect for yourself, you're just going to make shitty lifts, not give effort, not care, not try hard, just treat it like whatever. It's like, that's not having respect for yourself, because you're kind of just wasting time. So my hope is that they have this expectation and standard they can take with them. The next person comes in and they're doing the exact same thing I taught. And then the other person can say, oh, and I think this can be refined even more. It's like, let's put a different exhaust on it. Let's put something that's going to make it go a little faster, a little quicker, more fuel efficiency, whatever it is. So I find that to be very important. The way you do that with minimal contact is probably very, very hard, because it's taken me a lot of time and a lot of again, that whole thing of like, how do you teach these kids those skills? It's being explicit all the time. The one thing I realized being a strength coach is your voice is going to get tired, because you're yelling the entire time. Not yelling like screaming, but you have to speak to the group, and then it has to be consistently in their ears of, put everything back the exact way you got it. Set this up like that. Grab these, put those there, fill that out, do this, make sure you do this when you like it's you're on it, because you're trying to just remind groups. If you're a one-on-one session, it's just like a little poke and a prod here and there. But as a group, it's like you have to communicate that to them all at the same time, because you have 20 to 50 different people, completely different people, like completely different. Besides the fact that we're like the same species, like it's completely different. And, a lot of that is like, you coach to somewhat like the lowest common denominator, in the sense of, I have to remind everybody, like I have to remind the lowest, the one who doesn't listen the most, call it that. So it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of attention. How you do that with like minimal touches, really tough. And I'll say that whole culture thing. I use this as an example. I'd probably, whatever, I'm biased, but the baseball team, when they finish their lift, as soon as we finish, I'll say my last words and say, all right, you guys are good to go. See you next week. Almost every one of them will come up to me and like shake my hand personally. And then there are some groups where they're like, oh, can we leave yet? Can we get out of here? And it's like, as soon as they're done, like finally, and they just jet for the door. I don't hear a word. I might get like a thanks coach here and there, but like very, very big differences between like groups and sports and coaches, but also how coaches coach. That baseball coach is going to say, we're going to do things well. We're going to tuck our shirts in. We're going to shake hands. We're going to thank. We're going to acknowledge, and I think that's like good leadership from the top down, person to person to person. If you see that and there's like continuity and congruity, that definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it's such a difficult situation to kind of play with. And I notice it with my team. I force them. Well, I don't force anybody to do anything.
Suggest.
But I highly suggested and put little threats in there. I'm like, the expectation that I put onto you guys is like, for every competition that you do, you have to volunteer at least one session. Because what I find is like, there will be such big clubs that give back nothing.
Yeah.
Where it'll be like, they don't respect the equipment, they don't respect the setup, they don't respect, and they're always the people that have the most to say, but then they provide the least. Where it's like, okay, you have a huge club, but you don't help set up, you don't help tear down, you don't help with volunteers or technical officials or whatever that kind of looks like. You don't give back to the community that's giving to you. Versus what the culture of the club that I originated from, it ran every competition. Half the volunteers kind of aligned with that club, and so you just saw it, and it was like the expectation. And it's like creating that culture of like those standards that you want. Now, obviously, you need a lot more touches of that, where it's like, no, these are the expectations, these are the standards, and like slowly building that, and then you see like, okay, they consistently do that over time. They offer to help. They they put their weights back. They're not chaotic. They clean up after themselves. Where these other clubs or these other areas might be like they'll leave trash on the in the back room, where it's because they don't see what how much effort it is because they just get to leave. It's like, oh, just leave it. It's not our space. Somebody else will do it.
Yeah.
Versus like forcing them into being like, no, you have to take care of this space. You have to wipe your bars down. Something that I'm thinking about just right now is like making my athletes like clean the chalk off the bars. Where it's like, no, this is a priority. These are the expectations of like take care of your equipment. Because sometimes it's like we have 15 Alico bars at the gym. And it's like they take that for granted of like, these are expensive bars.
Yeah.
Like take care of them, brush them down so they don't get rusty and they don't get the chalk in the bearings so it stops spinning as nicely. But it's just like slowly.
I think a lot of that is reframing it. From my experience, it's reframing it as like, no, this is your weight room. Like it's not, it's actually not my weight room. You know, it's because I have no stake in the high school, but it's like, you're going to use this for 4 years. It's your weight room. So like treat it like it's yours. And then it's also realizing you take that step back. And Carl Nadolsky put up this related to obesity recently, which is genetics loads the gun and then environment pulls the trigger. And it's that idea of like, we all are going to have diversity with our genetics, like our genetic profiles that create who we are, you know, and then we're also going to have huge environmental differences where some people are brought up just in a way where they don't value cleanliness. I'm like, are you going to hold it against someone because their entire life they didn't value that? It's like, no, but can you then rework it so that they care about it in your space? I guess that's the most important thing. And then like, you're not trying to change them as a person, because I don't think there's like cleaner is better than not, but like, okay, can you at least change it so you're in my space and your space, our space, and we're treating it well, which is these very obvious standards. And I think you like outlining that is important too, because we have rules in the weight room, very basic. It's like no gum, you know, no open-toed shoes. Don't distract people while they're lifting, like keep a clean space, like super, super basic. At least then I can say, look at the rules. Like those are for everybody, you know, those are for everybody. So the space can be maximized. It's not just because we want it certain ways because we're neurotic or detailed. That has fuck all to do with it, you know. It's so we can use the space really, really well.
One of the biggest, like coaching youth athletes has really like opened my eyes of like, I need to be so clear on what I'm saying. And I think you had Seb on your podcast talking about like what his biggest thing he took from doing the podcast and doing the commentary, and it was like being diligent about what he says. And I've been thinking about that a lot, where it's like, how many words do I use that I'm just like saying words that have no impact? Or how often am I coaching an athlete and I'm saying too much? And I'm not actually being clear. And when I work with like the youth athletes, it's like they have so many less experiences for me to relate it to. So I have to be even more clear of exactly what I want them to do or exactly what I'm trying to get across. And sometimes I'll find myself like going into the research or like trying to be like, yeah, like this is what it says, instead of just being like us going to their level.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think communication is all we have. Like we obviously have like non-linguistic forms of communication. Yeah, facial expressions, gestures, other things that are behavioral, but it literally is all we have. You know, which is why I think it's important to be able to communicate yourself well, is so that at least we're all on the same page. And I found one person I've taken a note from his playbook is Dane Miller, and how he communicates the same ideas I think I'm trying to get across of, instead of saying like abs, he'll say gut, you know, and talk about being twitchy, instead of saying maybe like power. I'm getting away from using the word force. You know, I'm like catering my language to like what kind of sounds colorful and comic booky, but like also gets the point across. Like we need to make you more twitchy, get more pop in your legs. Well, this is gonna like blow up your gut. I've been saying blow up a lot. It's gonna like blow up your arms, you know, blow up your back, get you a big neck, and it's kind of funny and it's like kind of colorful, but I think it's like communicated then in a way that could be understood. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get like a huge neck, I mean, really it's like traps and scaps or whatever. And I think just that is one fun thing though about having a big sample, like a big number of groups and a big number of kids. Is like I can just play around with things and see how it's received. And you kind of listen. If you listen well, you can pick up on what they pick up on because they're going to regurgitate it in a similar way. So I say drive hard a lot. It's like off the chest, drive hard, out of the bottom, drive hard, at the top of the pool, drive hard. And then I'll start hearing people say drive hard. And I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, all right. They kind of get it now,
Yeah.
So that like intentionality almost also inverts itself of we're not being more intentional with more words or more precise words, but being more intentional to communicate in a way that can be understood.
Yeah. I think it relates to like this expertise curve where it's like you always see like the memes of like the Jedi or the people in the robes on either side, and then you have the neurotic guy in the center where it's you get into coaching and it's like I gotta be scientific, I gotta say all of this information that's in my head. And then on either end is like being more clear and more understanding to your athletes. And it's this difficult like bell curve of as you coach longer, you start to get really neurotic and like you want to tell all of the information that you're processing. And then it's like, okay, wait. This actually isn't clear to them. They don't understand all of this stuff. I'm trying to talk to them like their weightlifting IQ is like 5 years when it's only 1 year. And it's like, how do I communicate and how do I long-term athlete development the communication with my athletes is like this hard game of navigating.
Yeah. I also think it's, navigating what's the expectation, what would they want? And I think, a behavioral hack would be ask a question, get an answer, follow it up with a response of, would you guys like to know more about why we train this way? Yeah. Okay, now I can tell you. And the fact that you agreed to wanting to know more, you're going to be more likely to listen. But if I just say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, there's not like implicit agreement that we're going to talk about something now that they're bought into. So I think if I try to introduce more technical topics of like, hey, are you interested in science at all? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you something that I find, is helpful or useful or just interesting. Did you know that when you do like RDLs, you can make your muscles longer? Whoa. Yeah, you literally add the, functional contractile unit of muscle in series and you make muscles longer, which can help with, speed of contraction. I'm saying all this stuff like can help with speed of contraction. And they're like, oh my God. And it's like, yeah, but you broach it with, hey, would this be something you're interested in? Would this be something I could talk to you about? Or this is something you want to know more about? And I think approaching it in that way, just in general, from a culture to, information to a coach athlete relationship standpoint of there's a mutual agreement first. Anything that's going to follow that clause is going to be taken more seriously. So I think I'm going to start doing that more of like big group. Hey, we care about the weight room, right? Yeah. Okay. This is how we express our care for them.
Sweet. What are some things that you wish weightlifting coaches or strength coaches could take from your experience from working with a high school weight room?
I don't know if this is, I kind of have to create a little bit of a straw man and say what I think people aren't doing. But I think just prioritizing this idea of the most important aspect of it is health, like health first and foremost, like health and well-being, getting all of that out of it so people can operate in the world well. That's number one, because people will talk about coaches and experts will talk about that with kids more than they will adults of we're trying to get them prepared for a lifetime of movement, physical literacy, all these great things, physical activity. But then when you get to weightlifting and powerlifting, it's like, oh, we're going to like snatch and clean and jerk and we're going to compete. And I want to keep you competing so you can keep paying me. And it's like, I understand that. Let's talk about how this is like really important beyond that. And that it doesn't just have to be weightlifting. And it just doesn't have to be weightlifting 3 days a week. It can be snatch one day, clean one day, jerk one day, and do a bunch of like S&C accessories, unilateral stuff, belt squats, we don't have to front squat and we're a weightlifter. It's like, I think pushing that message of coaching the person, maybe not the total, is important. Like everybody at some point will move out of that phase of pushing big numbers in the competitive lifts. So are they prepared to move out of it into a phase of, I guess I'm going to try bodybuilding now, or I'm going to try powerlifting, or maybe I'll do CrossFit. Maybe I'll just train 3 days a week, full body. I did that podcast with Michael Roberts, and he, gave the general recommendation of 2 days a week in the weight room, full body. Maybe do a push day, maybe do a pull day, and you kind of got a lot out of what you need. 3 days a week, like get a lot out of what you need, which is do some big compounds, train hard, and you do that for the rest of your life. So that's a really important message.
Sweet. Kind of shifting gears into your background now as a PhD candidate. Do you have your topic you're kind of focusing in towards?
Yeah, so I have done some pilot testing, and I'm going to be looking at 2 different forms of isometric maximal strength testing, and then how they influence the DSI, which is the dynamic strength index, which is like a prescriptive ratio that would give you support in deciding an athlete needs like more explosive style training or more maximal strength style training. So it's using force plates to look at like an isometric hip belt squat versus the isometric mid thigh pull, and how those differ in like peak forces, rate of force development, and then that would be directly influence the DSI, because the DSI is a ratio of your peak force in a counter movement jump to peak force in an isometric maximal strength test.
Sweet. With going into this, what has been the biggest takeaways in the literature that you've been finding?
Yeah, I would say the things I've taken away from just like my time in the program in general, from a coaching standpoint, like programming standpoint, would be a better understanding of fitness qualities, like biomotor qualities, like power, explosive strength, like different forms of strength, maximal strength, strength, call it strength endurance, like just the way you would kind of understand performance in like a resistance training setting, how percentages can be scaled to those qualities. So if you are targeting, call it power, I recently programmed this for football. You do like a barbell squat jump, or like a barbell squat jump, but it's not like a full depth squat, just like a quarter squat. And you do like 30% of your back squat. It's like, okay, you're going to get like a lot of power out of that. And then it's seeing as like different percentages being used for different qualities, different movements having different effects beyond just, I do a press to get my shoulder stronger, but it's like, okay, I'll do a Z press to build my gut, so to speak, or I'll do like a half kneeling something to focus more on kind of like mid. I'm going to use all these buzzwords. Really, it's just like stay stable and braced really well. So I've been playing around with a lot of that stuff, different types of split squats, different types of like lateral lunges. And most of this, honestly, is not from the research. It's from like my coaching experience and then them kind of playing together. But just broadening options, like what are your options? What are the tools? And then how can you use them? And the research is going to give you good ideas of what does this percentage do in terms of the adaptation. So I'm kind of working through like, what are the neuromuscular adaptations to resistance training? Like when you have changes in muscle size, muscle fiber composition, changes in, call it like pennation angle, changes in fascicle length. Then you have changes in kind of like neural drive, which would be like a measure it would be like the change to the EMG that's like tracking the working muscle and like how it's functioning. So you might have, literally writing about this morning, but like synchronization between different motor units. So you get them closer together, you would create force more quickly. You get like, maybe more drive to the muscles. You get a more forceful contraction, the ideas of like intramuscular coordination. So just think about all that stuff physiologically. I don't know if that's really changed practice too much, but I would say most of it has come from how the exercises can then influence those changes or those qualities. And playing across a bigger gradient of like, oh, this sport's in season. What can 3 sets of 3 do once a week? What effect does that have? What kind of like like physiological change you're looking for? And I think you kind of have to be steeped in the literature to understand that, because most of the literature on this stuff is looking at like, in this 6-week span, doing this intervention, we track changes in like, all the neurological adaptations that would happen. And this is what we found, but it's not like over an entire 52-week year. And, these phases of training, what would happen. So I think you have to kind of like piece and part those together to create like this more comprehensive picture of, earlier on, focus on capacity, building machinery, right? And then kind of attempting to rewire that, but like with the younger populations, probably more volume, longer, more variety, longer, more teaching, more coordination work, longer. And then it's like, okay, let's see if we can get some maximal strength, which I don't know how needed that stuff is when kids are progressing with sets of 10 and 8 and 6 just as well. It's like, let's do that stuff longer, more often.
What would your recommendation be for coaches wanting to start implementing more research into how they shape their practice, and some of the mistakes that you kind of see from coaches trying to apply that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake is thinking that one side of that equation has no impact or is useless. Because that's kind of what you'll hear, like it's just like a weird black and white thing. It's like research has no place, or it's like, dumb coaches, whatever. And it's like, I don't understand any of that at all. It's like there's a lot to glean from both sides, which is just be steeped in practice, understand kind of from bottom up, like basic physiology to all the applied work, and then have mentors see processes, systems of like implementing it, and then use that as an opportunity to kind of refine it to whatever makes sense to you. Have some sort of like attention to sussing out what change is going to have what effect. So if we, if you back off of rowing a lot in certain sports where it matters, like back strength matters, like what effect is that going to have? How can you suss out that effect has happened? So like, oh, I'll see this because you'll like, okay, we're going to go from like higher volume squatting to lower volume. Okay, we moved to lower volume squatting. Everyone kind of looks flat. And you have like a big group of people. It's like, everyone kind of looks flat. We should probably not do that. So I think being attuned to the situation, having a basic system or process, and then taking applied experience, available research, as communicated by experts, and as communicated by experts in a way that's like the consensus is, and then applying it just where it makes sense, right? So like Jake Rimmer has done a lot of work, and he'll talk about fractional sets in terms of like building muscle. When, he'll say like, say in the research, available research, they'll notice it's noticeable that 11 fractional sets is kind of where you top off, in terms of like hypertrophic response within a session. A fractional set's like half a set, like half a full set. Okay, so I'm probably going to do like 5 to 6 sets for a muscle group or a body part. Maybe a muscle group's more specific, but like that makes sense. So I can actually take my practice and say, if we were doing accessory work, maybe we have 2 to 3 exercises, maybe 2 to 3 sets. That's going to be about 5 to 6 total sets for that muscle or muscle group. I don't know how you would actually know if you're not getting bigger. How are you going to track that across time? Circumference measures, whatever. But like, just get stronger in that and say, it's been communicated to me that like the consensus volume recommendations are this. I'll do that. Put more weight on the bar with the same technique. You're probably most of the way there. So it's just like it's an integration of all that stuff, which at some point can be hard if you don't have enough people contributing, or if you don't have access to the resources. And what I mean by people contributing, I'm like a one-man team. So it's integrating that stuff is like, you have to integrate all of it. And Jordan, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like, oh, I'll integrate all this technical stuff and technological stuff and programming stuff and coach athlete stuff. And it's like, that's hard, but if you're a team with 5 other coaches, they can all contribute some different some different aspect of it, which is more what sport is. Football will have 5 strength coaches on staff, so they can bounce ideas off of each other. One person runs the tech, one person does most of the programming, everybody's on the floor. I think that makes for probably easier, more seamless integration of this stuff. So understand the science, understand the practice, maybe have people there to help you integrate it, and then be attuned to what's the effect, like what's happening. And if it's not working, how to pivot. Yeah.
I think a great place to kind of find all of that is probably in these power and strength summits that are happening all of a sudden. Little plug to what you've been working on. Uh, how do you see those impacting coach development over the long run?
Yeah. The biggest thing the biggest thing I think you're going to take away from an actual conference or summit that you won't get from a static piece of information, which is a piece of research or a video, direct communication with the person. Hey, I attended this summit and I wanted to reach out about a consult or about these questions I had. And I love your work. Networking is such a tremendous part of this space, especially in S&C, where you kind of get brought in where you get brought up, so to speak. It's like, hey, we know your work, we'll bring you in. You intern with us, and then we'll offer you a job. You were at that place, we know those people, we can trust them. You're probably a good fit here. We have your resume on file. We'll just like kick that out to people who are asking about strength coaches. So first and foremost, being able to get some FaceTime with these people is like tremendously important. You have to then follow it up with actually reaching out. It's not like, oh, I've seen you and telepathically it's understood we're going to work together. It's like, in no world does that exist. And being able to network well and being able to then say, hey, I've actually purchased something you've done. I was attending, I was live there, and I really love your work. And I'd love to talk more about how we can work together or how I can be involved with projects. And I think that reaching out, like, you'd be surprised by how many people are open and willing to it and interested, frankly. I think an important thing to mention, though, is that if you approach people with, I want something from you and I probably haven't ever paid you for anything, that's not going to work. Like, that doesn't work well just because people are really busy. It's not that they aren't interested in helping or supporting or giving time. But if you like show that investment, like, oh, I've consumed your stuff, I've like gotten products from you, it's like, I'd be willing to give that back 100%. So I think that allows the network opportunity. And then it also consolidates, condenses, and packages a lot of the information about what the speakers have written about and talked about in a way that I don't know if you're going to see anywhere else. Like, I've never seen anything about plyometrics nearly the way Mike delivered it. And that just helped me conceptualize it and reframe it a lot to where I feel more competent using them and progressing them. So sometimes you don't know what's going to stick until it does, and this provides the opportunity to hear from 8. Basically, I know it might be a little bit grandiose to say world class speakers and have them present on their areas of expertise, and then to be able to just kind of sit in on that and then have those network channels open up.
Sweet. One of the big things that I noticed was how open people were to talk. Like, doing this podcast, there's so many people that are just like, yeah, I would love to. And as like a newer coach, I remember thinking about that and being like, oh, I'll DM them or ask them, and being like, they're not going to want to do any of that. And the more and more I talk to these coaches or coaches practitioners, they're like, yeah, just reach out. Nobody actually reaches out or asks good questions. And then something that Stu McMillan talks about is like asking good questions, how to actually formulate questions that matter, versus a lot of the time coaches will have a problem, and then instead of asking about the principle or the system of the problem, they'll ask like for the method. And then as soon as you do that, it's like you lose out on the understanding of how to apply different strategies to fix the problem. And it's just like, oh, what do you do when you have 20 athletes in a gym? How do you communicate? And it's like you miss out on what matters for just like, oh, this is this X thing.
Yeah,
And then
that's
when
one
you
thing. That's one thing I appreciate about S&C is you'll get someone who comes in the weight room, thinking about one person who's got this like hip thing going on, so they can't squat and they can't dip below a certain depth, and still wants to train, still wants to put on size, plays a sport at a pretty high level, wants to play collegiately, and like, what do we do? If my only question was like, how do I get this person to squat well? It's like, that's the wrong question. The question should be, how do we develop the machinery that's going to help support performance? It's like, let's do a trap bar. It's like, well, I can't go down to the ground. It's like, well, let's elevate the trap bar. Okay, now your trap bar deadlift is just as important as any squat variation you're ever going to do. It's like, we're going to smash that, and we're still going to RDL and clean and do all these variations, but we're just going to use something that adds load to the tissues and force them to create force and then adapt by increasing size. So S&C is fun because it opens you up to this kind of lay of the land where principles matter more than systems. And the principle is this thing has to be able to function at a higher, higher output, basically. It's like, well, how do you do that? It's like, there are a lot of ways to do that. And it's kind of fun to play around with, like, what are some of the ways? What are some of the ways to like keep it interesting and keep it effective and target different joint angles and different like endurance qualities for, say, the arms while the legs work, endurance qualities for the legs while the arms work, stuff like that. So that, formulating a question, it's kind of that same idea. It's like, if you ask like, what exercise should this athlete do? That's kind of the wrong question, but it's like, what's the most important thing to train in this population is probably a better one.
Yeah, I find leaving my echo chamber of weightlifting has been really pivotal in like my development as a coach, where you just sit in this place where it's like, okay, my coach told me these weightlifters are successful with doing this. And so you just like stay in that instead of being like, there's so much and so much more money going into research around these other areas. There's so much more high quality education and knowledge out there that if you can just like disseminate what you want it to tell you, or not what you want it to tell you, but like what you're looking at, trying to understand, you can integrate it so well of like, oh, my athletes are slow off the hip, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to think about all of these weightlifting exercises that are going to make them faster, where it's like trying to force specificity because specificity is this important thing, versus being like, okay, they can't create enough power. What are exercises that create the highest amount of power? Where it's like, okay, maybe I'm doing quarter squat jumps where I can load it to a specific level or can create enough power output, or creating enough tissue adaptation in the tendons where it's like they can't use the stress shortening cycle well enough through the whatever, the dip and drive to create enough power through it so they get tipped forward or whatever that looks like. And it's like, okay, well, if I just focus on like my echo chamber of weightlifting, I'm going to miss out on this information on, let's say, Mike Young talking about plyometrics and developing plyometric ability that can impact your weightlifting practice.
Yeah, totally. In thinking about like plyometrics with this idea of like compliance, it's like shorter dips versus longer dips, speed of dip, direction of dip. That has been really fun to think about and like get into that space. Been thinking about more conditioning and sprinting. It's just like it opens up this like intellectual landscape that's more rich, and I really enjoy that. And I think it allows you to then like see things more clearly. Like, I was watching someone do some jerks and then top's muted, at the top of the drive, it's muted. It's like, okay, well, push press. And then you start to push press and you start to jump and you start to like, this is how we want it to look and move. And then you're like, oh, now we're getting that pop. That's really what we're looking for. And I think an important point to what you're saying is when you have a relatively broader understanding of performance, I would say that more things look less wrong, if that makes sense. When you only have like one lens, it's like, oh, that's stupid. When you have multiple lenses, you're like, I understand why. Like, I was doing some like, we'll call it like spring ankle stuff, but it's like you get on the ball of your foot, you kind of get into a crouch position, put some tension, like put some force through your foot to work on creating like stiffness. And I think about like pogo jumps and other jumps where you're kind of creating stiffness and just working through the ankles and through the feet. And maybe initially you're like, that's kind of silly and stupid. Like, why would you take your shoes off in a weight room? And then you're like, oh, that probably has a place. And runners and sprinters are doing, work where their heels elevated off of the floor and their toes on a plate, and they're doing marches in place or something. And you're like, okay, this makes a lot more sense now that I have a different lens to look at it through, of the specific adaptation to the specific tissues for the condition that's imposed, which is repeated ground strikes and like a lot of forces.
Yeah, it's development of a coach,
Yeah, that's
as you
right.
go.
The coach's journey, which
The
is what
coach's
we're all
journey.
on and will be on until we cease to exist.
So I want to be mindful. We've been on this for a while. So, what is one piece of advice you would give your previous self or your younger self?
That's a really good question. It's funny because I feel like I've always been so intellectually curious and open to experience that I wouldn't have imagined getting where I am now if you would have polled me, like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I think in terms of a process, it's like, how do you make that an easier process or simpler or more enjoyable one? It's like, I don't think that really exists. I think what I would have liked or appreciated, even then, it's hard. I I think it may have been more beneficial. See, even this is tough to say. Mentorship is very important. I think having mentorships in the sense of you can see things played out versus playing them out and then having that like lack of sureness to whether or not it's right or correct or the thing it should be. So I think at least having a circle close enough to say like, hey, how do you think about this? What do you think about this? And then I think being really open to communicate that is very important. Earlier on, I might have, it's tough because I tried to pursue mentors where I could, and they did what they could. And it's like, it's just a limitation of the situation. And that kind of broadened out. I thinking back now, though, even now, I wish maybe had more eyes and more experienced eyes on what I'm doing and just get feedback from it. So my advice to people who are developing is like, find people who can just give you feedback on what you're doing. That way you're not just like kind of shooting in the dark, if that makes sense. Because you could be completely right and then just not know it, or think like, oh, there must be better ways. And it's like, no, that's actually pretty good. That's probably more of a me thing than it is like in general, but good mentorship and also good feedback.
Sweet. Well, we'll wrap this one up. So, Josh, thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
I'm currently located in Morgantown, West Virginia. I'm kidding. You can find me on Instagram at Josh_Phil, WL, that's PHILWL, Philosophical Weightlifting everywhere else. Philosophical Weightlifting is the number one weightlifting education podcast. I'm kind of being silly. Yeah, Philosophical Weightlifting. You can go to my website. If you want to reach out, just shoot me an email, philosophicalweightlifting@gmail.com. Jordan, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and chop it up a bit about coaching, high school S&C, weightlifting, and lessons learned from just being in that space for so long.
Sweet. So thank you, Josh. If you took something from this podcast, subscribe or like the video or share it with some friends. Otherwise, sounds good. I'll see you next week.